This is on the water side.
Welcome.
That's my daughter. That's my
Welcome.
son. And this is my brother's son.
Welcome, everybody. Could I have your attention, please? Welcome. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Could I have your attention, please? Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have my dad's brother and his sister, family, high school, college, graduate school friends, neighbors, sporting friends, church members, pastor, and lifelong friends here to honor his memory. And I know that my dad would be honored, as we are, to have you here to celebrate his life. And at this point, we've got a few remembrances that we'd like to share with you. I'll say a few words. My brother will say a few words. Cisco will say a few words, my dad's sister, and Mel Salter will say a few words as well. Courage, courage. Those were my dad's final words to me the evening before he passed. We had been having a conversation about end of life, and I could sense from the tone of his voice and the intensity of his stare that my dad's intent in saying those words was not only to assuage my sadness in the face of impending loss, but to also challenge me to embrace this next stage of our relationship and to move on with courage. As my father challenged me, I would also ask you, his family and friends, to keep my father in your memory as a man who lived life enthusiastically and courageously. I feel lucky as a son to have had a father who is, a titan in my world. My dad was a great intellect, an artist, an athlete, a linguist, a man of faith, a voracious reader, a world traveler, a great friend, a loving husband, brother, father, and grandfather. He was a Renaissance man who loved life and lived it courageously, and his shoes were and are enormously daunting for a son to fill. There are a few impressions or thoughts of my dad that stand out for me. First, I think of my dad as a man of no particular country allegiance, but as a man with a global passport. He was born in Maracaibo, Venezuela, to Dutch parents, speaking Spanish as his native tongue alongside Dutch. He came to the U.S. for middle school, high school, college, and graduate school, and spoke the English language with a vocabulary range wider than most. He could understand and speak German. All of these languages meld into a wonderful salad when I remember my dad speaking with his dad. There might be some Spanish, some Dutch, some English, all wrapped into a single sentence. But what stands out in my mind on this subject is that my dad embraced cultures, not just appreciated other cultures, but courageously embraced and took real interest in people far beyond his own cultural heritage. And that, I think, endeared my dad to people he'd met from all walks of life and from all kinds of backgrounds. Second, I've always been in awe of my dad's intellect and love of learning. He had raw intelligence, but he also read voraciously and could speak with depth on a wide range of subjects, whether music or art or history or politics. He was always very precise with his word choice in these discussions. And while he didn't wear his intellect on his sleeve, it became a running joke for my brother and me to tease my dad about his oft-used professorial expression, how shall I put it? In fact, I would often wonder if my dad's chosen profession, architecture, was not well suited for him. He was too much of a Renaissance man to be doing just one thing. He loved to read and to discuss his views in a courageous effort to improve not just his own understanding of a subject, but also that of those with whom he was having the conversation. I always thought he would be the ultimate professor, the ultimate teacher, because he cared to discuss subjects. And of course, he was a great teacher to me. I could always rely on my dad to give me editorial comments on a paper or to discuss a topic that I was struggling with. And it never ceased to amaze me that he could effortlessly provide fruitful guidance, no matter how esoteric the subject. Third, my dad loved the arts just beyond just an intellectual pursuit. If you were to ask my father his profession, he would reply architect, but I think he probably would have preferred artiste. In those situations where my dad would forget a name or a place, he would often co-opt a phrase that he'd heard from Bruno Pfister at one point, and he would exclaim, "I'm an artiste," as if to say, "You need not be too concerned with the little details," since he appreciated the bigger picture. But my dad's grasp of music history, the visual arts, and art history spanned both the bigger picture of artistic movements, but also the specifics. I've got many memories of my dad playing a version of Name That Tune with Hans and me when some classical music was on the radio. He'd ask us who the composer was, and Hans and I would flounder around a bit with a few guesses, but my dad would point out a particular musical phrase as a hint. And if we would finally get the composer right, then the game would continue, and my dad would ask us when in the composer's life was the piece composed, or what prompted the composer to write the piece. My dad loved opera and the theater as well. I have very fond memories of going to American Repertory Theater in Cambridge and the Huntington Theater with my dad, and there would be the inevitable discussion around the production, the playwright, and what themes the playwright was exploring. And of course, my father was an artist himself, preferring charcoal and pastels and occasionally watercolor to produce an incredible range of landscape scenes and subjects that span Venezuela, Argentina, the Netherlands, UK, Germany, France, and the US. I did not appreciate the range of works that my father had produced until the past couple of years, when my dad took it or became most interested in giving birthday gifts and holiday gifts of his past works. Hans recently took it upon himself to create digital images of many of these works, which I think will be rotating. We'll get them on, yeah. But they count over 120 odd works. My dad's hand is immediately recognizable across all of these works that go back to his teenage years and up until just months before his death. My dad immersed himself in the arts because he saw the arts as a medium to hold, as it were, the mirror up to nature. Lastly, there was nothing more important to my dad than his family and friends. He was very proud of the family history, and I remember he was quite bemused in telling the story about his uncle who had painstakingly mapped the Henkes lineage in the Netherlands and had decided to stop at one point once he determined that Henkeses were descendants of farmers and common thieves. My dad was also a devoted husband, who I know appreciated his good fortune in being married to my mother, not only because she cooked and cared for him lovingly, but also because she shared his interests in the arts, landscapes, and the world. And with Hans and me, my dad took an active role in our upbringing, not wanting us to go to boarding school, I believe, because of the extended time that he was away from his parents in his own upbringing. My dad loved being a grandfather, and truly courageously in this day and age sought to enrich the lives of his grandkids by taking them to the operas, plays, and various museums. And he was always ready for a chess match with any of my boys, always a teacher. Perhaps my father knew that the end was near when we had that conversation about end of life in the hospital on February 5th, but he would not be defeated by the myriad electrodes, tubes, and lines that were crisscrossing his arms and chest. He wanted to leave the earth free of these things, which of course we made sure happened for him in his final hours. My dad's life is a model for me of living life courageously and uncompromisingly. He embraced life as a family man, an intellectual, as a teacher, as an artist, as an international polyglot. My dad would want us to remember him that way. Courage, courage, Dad. You may now walk with your parents and relatives in the next life, but your memory is alive and well here with us and will be my constant companion. I love you, Dad.
I'm going to be a little briefer. I think Thilo covered most of the bases. I'm simply going to cover the inspiration that my father was. As Thilo said, my father was a global citizen. And these, I think, the three inspirational aspects of my father that I value the most are that he was that global citizen. He was at home in 3 continents. He spoke 3 languages, understood more. His reverence of knowledge, right? I think he was the eternal student, always curious, read 2 papers a day, always had a barrage of questions. I remember Mal also saying when he first met, and sorry Mal if I'm hijacking your speech here, but I got on a bus, I think, going to a squash match, and I think my father hit him with 10 or 12 questions about where he's from, what he does, and what he's interested in. So my father really valued the opportunity to experience, and I think that's one takeaway I have from his life. And I guess you realize after a while what those real takeaways were in the special moments later in life. But some of those experiences that we all learn from and cherish and have memories of, and I listed a few here. Things like he once told me that he landed on the MetLife building in New York City on a helicopter, which you can't do anymore. He supplemented the design of an IMPay building, not something you do every day. And a humorous story which I'm sure Siska and Avert probably can recount too, is, although they probably came after, that he was once lured into a tar pit in Venezuela. I guess there was a local who thought it was funny to see if he could get my father to bathe in it or something like that, and my grandfather had to bathe him in petroleum or something like that. So we had a little bit of a laugh every once in a while too. But we all have those special moments and memories. Global citizen, knowledge, and of course art, which Thilo said too, and we'll get, it's gone on to screensaver, I guess. We'll get that changed, but one thing we want to show is that the oeuvre, his creations. He was a creator, and I think that was one thing that I always wanted to emulate. There was no replication, it was about emulation. Find your own path, right? But there was guidance, right? I was an architect wannabe. I caught the bug early, but then he said, be sure you want to be an architect. You have to know the most and you'll get paid the least. And I said, okay. But now I meld those two things actually in my own profession. I found my own way. I'm in the design world. I'm on an international stage. And so thank you, Dad, for also providing some guidance to chart my course. So I'm going to conclude with a very lighthearted anecdote here. Again, Thilo and I are then we were bunking together, and he would come in and throw up the shades, and he'd say, come on boys, time for all good men to rise. Let's go play tennis. Well, now it's time for all good men to rise. Love you, Dad.
it's about the same person. I recognize a lot of characteristics that have been treated during Thilo and Hans's speeches. So, I'm going to begin about Maarten. It is an honor to talk to a large group that all loved Maarten for his charm and loyalty. He was a man of many parts, which reflected his broad range of interests. He satisfied his curiosity by reading and traveling, and enjoyed immortalizing new places he visited with his beautiful and stylish sketches, be it a tree in Richmond Park, or a Saxon farmhouse in Drenthe, Holland, or even closer to home with memories of Maine through the eyes of an artist. There is also the Maarten who loved to get together with his lifelong friends. There are names I had already often heard when I was a young kid in Caracas. Bill Stiles, Jeff Brown, Mel Salter, Whit Scott, and Dion Menzo. They would get together and for over more than 60 years would share jokes and have a really good laugh. During one of his summer holidays at home in Venezuela, Maarten found time to pick up a chisel and hammer to start sculpting. I've seen 2 of them on the save screen. I remember this vividly as he had chipped away in the heat under a parasol and between the laundry hanging out to dry in our sunny patio in Caracas. Unperturbed, he succeeded in carving 2 terrific sculptures. One of a group of men playing jeu de boule, and another of 2 leapfroggers. He loved traveling and made trips through England and Mexico to market Henkes jenever. He thoroughly enjoyed doing this for his uncle Hendrik Jan, who was the head of the family concern, which had a distillery in Schiedam, Rotterdam. On the way he always thought of friends and family and brought them presents and souvenirs. As a child in Venezuela, Maarten loved listening to music and started taking piano lessons with Mrs. Hutchinson in Maracaibo. After leading on to his enthusiasm for classical music and attending the wonderful concerts at the Boston Symphony Hall. I made a mistake. Later leading on to his enthusiasm for classical music and attending the wonderful concerts at the Boston Symphony Hall. He treated Rizzo and myself to a marvelous evening of the orchestra during our stay at Elliott Street on the occasion of his 80th birthday. The celebration was fantastic. I especially remember outings with my brother to several locations while on his visits. He spent a day once in Argentina, down in the Boca, that's the harbor of Buenos Aires, well supplied with our sketchbooks and Maarten's favorite medium, which he called artista frescol. I loved these day trips, which we occasionally made over the years in South America, but also in Holland and other countries. Even as a graduate, Maarten was not easily embarrassed, and he would join me, as his younger sister, all dressed up in crazy clothes, for a spontaneous dance just in our living room in Wimbledon. We could have a party just anywhere. Between all his activities, Maarten spent lots and lots of time reading, be it the newspaper or a good book, always absorbing knowledge, facts, and information. At home, our mother had a nickname for him. She called him affectionately Professor. He responded quite happily when addressed with his own very personal title. Maarten was also a sportsman and enjoyed frequent games of tennis and golf. He also could spend hours of patiently playing in swimming pools and lakes with his children, nieces and nephews, and later even his grandchildren. be it in Holland during a family reunion or at the country club. Having Maarten around was always a big help. He enjoyed entertaining children and kept them very happy. Maarten, the man of many parts, always kept up his positive attitude, even during many many consecutive periods of health problems. Nevertheless, as Hans noted, he still managed to keep up with world politics, as well as sport news. He followed the latest academic progress of each of his grandchildren at school and at college, a devoted interest which never slackened. Maarten's professional achievements should also be included here. As he became respected for his work on Selby the Hancock scraper's construction problems and as the architect of the impressive Boston fire station. Now, on a purely personal level, Maarten was not only a man of many parts, but a wonderful brother, father, uncle, and grandfather. And, of course, as the husband with a very special part of his heart reserved for his dear wife, Brigitte.
For those who I haven't met with yet, my name's Mal Salter, and Maarten and I were pals. This would be our 70th anniversary of palship. What I'd like to do is propose a toast to Maarten. It's going to take a little while, so I hope you'll just bear with me here. And there are many things that we could toast. And we heard a sort of an inventory, an amazing inventory of things that we could toast, including his artwork, which is now being shown to my right on the screen. But what I'd like to toast specifically is Maarten's extraordinarily positive view of life and the energy of his engagement. And the symbol for me of that positive view of life and his total engagement is his laugh. The Maarten Henkes laugh. Now, 10 days ago, we were sitting in the kitchen with Hans and with Brigitte, and we sort of stopped the conversation and we said, who was that artist who painted the picture, The Scream? Remember that? Well, actually, there were two artists who have painted the picture of The Scream. One, which we all identified with, which was Egon Sailer, who was a Viennese, and that was a self-portrait. And then there was Edvard Munch, The Scream. And we looked at each other and we said, if they had known Maarten, they would have painted a picture called The Laugh. And I just want to make a couple of comments on the laugh. Because actually, Maarten had 3 laughs. And he had variations on these as well. The first laugh that Maarten had was more of a chuckle. I used to refer to it as the Henkes chuckle. It came from here. It came from up here. The first time I became aware of that, and he used it a lot, and the first time and like all his laughs, it really evokes the kind of person he is. The first time I experienced the chuckle was in 1955. We were at Andover together, and we were trying out for the squash team. And Maarten had come from a tradition of tennis, and he didn't know how to play squash. And I had come from a tradition of badminton, and I didn't know how to play squash either. And so we decided to go out for the team, and we played many challenge matches over a period of time. It took us a couple of years to get on the varsity. We finally did. But let me tell you about the chuckle. When Maarten won a point, That was it. He'd go to the service box and serve. When he was scored against, there was always this chuckle. So what that mean? It was like a lot of people, when they lose a point, they bang their racket against the wall, or they do something else. Maarten would chuckle. And I would try to figure out, why is Maarten chuckling when someone has just scored a point against him? And it took me many years to figure this out. But what I figured out was the chuckle was Maarten saying, this is the way the game ought to be played. He always said, good point. But he loved to play the game, and he loved even when someone scored points against him. And that was very much a part of Maarten. Maarten had a second laugh, too. The second laugh came from the chest, around the chest of the heart. It's what I call Maarten's ode to joy laugh. And I first experienced that laughter, became really conscious of that laugh in the fall of 1962. And I was giving a party at the Junior Common Room at Leverett House at Harvard to welcome friends, the wife of a friend from Germany who had come to join him during his graduate studies at Harvard. And I thought it'd be nice to have a welcoming ceremony and meet some of the Europeans that I knew in the Boston area. And it was a beautiful room, and wood paneled, and a red carpet. And so of course I thought, I'll invite Brigitte. Because I had known Brigitte when she was working for the Joint Center of Urban Studies, and she was part of our ski group that used to go up to Mad River and to Sugarbush. In fact, your brother came once with us on that trip. And I said, well, maybe to fill it out, I'll invite Maarten. So, in fact, we had this wonderful party, and Maarten arrived, and Brigitte arrived, and I said, I think I'll introduce them. So I introduced Maarten and Brigitte, and so I get credit for that, don't I, ladies and gentlemen? And I introduced Maarten and Brigitte, and we had a chat. And as I was, Maarten had his beer, and Brigitte had her glass of white wine, and Maarten, in a very, a gentlemanly way, had prepared an elegant hors d'oeuvre. It was a Triscuit with a little piece of cheese on it, and I left to talk to other people. And then I heard a laugh. I looked around and I said, that sounds like Maarten, but I don't know that I've ever heard that laugh before. So I couldn't see Maarten. And so I walked back to where I left them, and there was Maarten and Brigitte down on the rug. Because Brigitte had dropped her cheese off the cracker onto the rug, and Maarten, being the gentleman, went down to fetch the cheese so it wouldn't get ground into the red carpet. And then Brigitte joined him, and they were down there laughing. This wonderful, joyous laugh, like this. They were saying, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened. And there they are, down on the rug with this joyous laugh. There was a third laugh, which was, of course, the one we all know and love, which is the belly laugh. The belly laugh. And I'm not going to regale you with stories about the straightforward belly laugh. But there was a subtlety with that, I discovered, with that belly laugh, that it was not only reaching out and celebrating a wonderful moment, but there was something sort of protective about it. I can't remember the year, Avery, but I can remember when you drove down from, and the boys know this because I've told this story a couple of times, you drove down from Cornell and you had I think it was a red Ford Fairlane convertible.
Correct.
And I think it was a soft top rather than a hard top.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And
only way to go to university.
only way to go to university. And he was either giving the car or loaning the car to Maarten and Brigitte, who were married by that time and living on Beacon Street. And he was rushing off to Logan Airport. So we all jumped in the car to drive him to the airport. And Everett was driving, and Maarten was in the passenger seat on the back. And in no time at all, we get to the airport, and Avery says, goodbye, and runs in. Maarten turns over to the seat, to the driver's seat. We go out, start driving out, and we're on the road for about 30 seconds. And he turns to me, and he says, Mal, we have no brakes. I said, that's impossible. I said, you know, Avery drove the car, you know, from Beacon Street to the airport. It's got to have brakes. He said, no, Maarten didn't use the brakes. Avery didn't use the brakes. So immediately, you know, I have these images of, you know, of Avery sort of defining himself as, you know, Juan Manuel,
Juan
Fangio, the Argentinian race car driver. And he said, what are we going to do about it? And I said to Maarten, I said, well, Maarten, we're going to drive slowly. You know, and all of a sudden he goes, big laugh. You know, big, nervous laugh. And so we kind of creep through the Sunder Tunnel, and he turns to me and he says, Mal, how are we going to park the car on Beacon Street? I said, we're not going to park the car on Beacon Street. He said, what are we going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to find a long, empty sidewalk, and we're going to kind of snuggle up next to the curb with your tires against the curbstone, and the car will come to an end. Oh, you know, and he thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And anyway, we survived that. And we had many, many laughs over the 70 years together. And it's a laugh that I am going to miss. And there's deep sadness in that fact. But here's the good news. It turns out that laugh is an inheritable trait. Tilo has that laugh. Hans has that laugh. And for that, we are really blessed. So I would like to propose a toast. Actually, not to the Maarten laugh, but to the Henkes laugh, because it's with us for a long time, real time and in memory. And so here's to the Henkes laugh.
Cheers.